All right, welcome to your deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling the future of the tobacco industry, or, maybe the lack thereof.
Mm,
You shared 3 reports from Truth Initiative with us.
yeah.
Game changer, shifting from tobacco control to ending the industry's influence for good. That's one of them.
Big one.
How big tobacco is trying to sell a do-gooder image and what Americans think about it. That's the second one. And then the third one, why ban the sale of cigarettes? The case for abolition.
Wow.
So, big questions, right? We're going to explore the arguments for ending big tobacco's influence,
Sure.
how the public actually views the industry,
Yeah.
and what potential policy changes we might see on the horizon.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating landscape, and the reports they lay out a pretty bold vision. We're kind of moving beyond traditional tobacco control,
Right.
which you're familiar with, right, into this idea of endgame.
Yeah.
Imagine a future where commercial tobacco and nicotine use
Yeah.
are, essentially relics of the past.
Okay, endgame. That sounds pretty radical. Is a world without cigarettes even possible?
It might seem far-fetched at first, but the reports argue that it's not only possible but essential.
Okay.
Think about it. We're talking about the leading cause of preventable death in the U.S.
Right.
Over 480,000 deaths annually. Staggering economic costs. Over $425 billion.
Yeah, those are numbers that are hard to ignore. But we have made some progress, right? With things like smoking bans, taxes, things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. But the industry's evolved too, right? Their
Mm.
tactics have evolved. The introduction of e-cigarettes has dramatically changed the landscape.
Right.
These new products, particularly those with appealing flavors, have really created a youth vaping epidemic while not really impacting adult smoking cessation rates that much.
So instead of helping people quit, they're just hooking a new generation.
Yeah, essentially. The reports go into how the industry has, co-opted the language of harm reduction,
Hmm.
presenting e-cigarettes as a solution to smoking, while, at the same time lobbying against proven public health strategies.
Hmm. So one of the things I thought was really interesting in these reports is what it said about public perception.
Yeah.
Is anyone buying this do-gooder image big tobacco's trying to sell?
It's interesting, despite the PR efforts, public trust in the tobacco industry is really low. Over 70% of Americans view tobacco, vaping, and e-cigarette companies unfavorably,
Yeah.
and most actually support stronger regulations.
So there's like a real disconnect. Then people want action, but the policy hasn't caught up.
Right.
The reports talk about endgame strategies, but what does that actually, look like? What does that look like in practice?
Well, the reports outline, both near-term and long-term strategies.
Okay.
In the near term, the focus is on really practical, achievable goals, things we can do right now. We're talking about flavor restrictions on all tobacco products at the federal level,
Everywhere.
restricting points of sale to adult-only stores, reducing nicotine levels in combustible tobacco products to non-addictive levels, and just improving access to cessation interventions.
So those are the immediate steps, like what we can do now.
Yeah.
But what about like the more, I don't know, radical long-term vision?
For the long game, the reports explore some pretty fascinating ideas.
All right.
Developing new cessation interventions like novel therapies, behavioral approaches, capping nicotine levels in all tobacco and nicotine products, not just combustibles, and even considering tobacco-free generation policies.
Tobacco-free generation policies. What does that even mean? That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It's not, really.
Okay.
It's a policy that gradually raises the minimum legal age for tobacco sales, eventually phasing out sales to entire generations. So you reach a point where no one born after a certain date can legally buy tobacco.
Wow, that's a huge shift. And then there's the even like more radical idea, like prohibiting the sale of cigarettes entirely, right? Like Robert Proctor argues in one of the reports.
Yeah, Proctor's argument is definitely the most controversial.
Right.
He compares cigarettes to lead paint and asbestos, incredibly harmful products that we would never sell today.
Right.
He highlights the industry's history of, corruption and its role in environmental damage, specifically the support for climate change denial.
Yeah, that's a powerful comparison. It makes you think differently about like selling cigarettes at all.
Right.
But let's be real. Can we expect the tobacco industry to just like accept their own demise?
Of course not, right? They're fighting tooth and nail. They're pouring millions into lobbying efforts and PR campaigns.
Of course.
One of their main tactics is trying to rebrand themselves as, like, part of the solution.
Right.
They're pushing e-cigarettes as harm reduction tools, investing in youth cessation programs, even going so far as to offer cessation services to government employees.
So they're trying to position themselves as the good guys now.
It's a bold PR move, yeah.
Yeah. But are people buying it?
That's where it gets interesting. The reports show that uh, despite their best efforts, the public is largely skeptical. Over 70% of Americans view tobacco companies unfavorably. And there's a growing demand for stricter regulations, especially for vaping products.
So they're not fooling everybody.
Right.
But, the tobacco industry, they're powerful. So what are some of the I don't know, some of their tactics, some of their more insidious tactics to try to cling to relevance and profits?
One of their most effective yet subtle tactics is just co-opting language.
Right.
Take, for example, the term harm reduction. Well, it is true that e-cigarettes may be less harmful than traditional cigarettes for individual smokers who completely switch.
Right.
The industry's really aggressive promotion of these products. It's actually led to, remember that surge in youth vaping that we talked about earlier?
Right.
Essentially creating a whole new generation of nicotine addicts.
So they're solving one problem.
Right.
And creating a bigger one.
Exactly.
Disturbing. What else? I'm starting to see why you call this a fascinating landscape. A lot going on beneath the surface here.
Yeah, well, they have a long history of funding research
Yeah.
that downplays the harms of smoking or, exaggerates the benefits of their new products, trying to create a veneer of scientific legitimacy for their claims.
So they're trying to muddy the waters with research.
Exactly. And they often try to bury research that doesn't support their claims, right? It's selective science.
Oh, wow. It makes you wonder how much of the science we see is truly independent.
It's hard to tell.
So what does all of this mean for, someone like me or someone like anyone listening who wants to stay informed and maybe even, advocate for change?
Well, it highlights the importance of, critical thinking, media literacy. We need to be more discerning consumers of information, especially when it comes to, anything funded or promoted by the tobacco industry.
So we can't take things at face value, basically. We have to dig deeper and consider the source.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the end game strategies, I want to talk about the industry's financial standing. After all, if they're losing money, how much power do they really have to push back against these end game strategies?
Yeah, it's an important point, right? Despite declining cigarette sales, the tobacco industry is not hurting. They generated $18.4 billion in 2016 alone. And they're aggressively seeking to expand their market, especially through these new products like e-cigarettes, which are really attracting, youth and young adults who have rejected traditional cigarettes.
So they have deep pockets
Yeah.
to fight with.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some specific examples of how they're going after this younger market, this one that's supposedly turned away from cigarettes?
Well, their social media marketing is relentless. They're using influencers, flashy campaigns, events that appeal to young people. They've even admitted to targeting children as young as third grade through school programs and community events.
Wow, that's disturbing. They're preying on the vulnerability of kids, knowing full well that these products are addictive. What about the role of flavors? I know that's a big issue with e-cigarettes.
Yeah. Flavors are absolutely central to their youth targeting strategy. While flavored cigarettes are banned, e-cigarettes come in this just dizzying array of candy-like flavors, clearly designed to appeal to, younger palates. And it works. Over 80% of young e-cigarette users say that flavor is the primary reason they started vaping.
It's like they're handing out candy cigarettes
Right.
laced with nicotine. It feels deliberately manipulative.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of regulations, has the industry tried to influence the FDA?
Well, they spent millions on lobbying, of course.
Fair.
But they've also, tried to stack the deck by recruiting scientists, funding research that downplays the harms of their products, trying to influence policy from the inside.
It's like they're trying to rig the game in their favor.
Yeah.
And it's not just the FDA, right? They've targeted lawmakers at all levels of government to try to block tax increases, weaken regulations, even kill bills that would strengthen tobacco control efforts.
Yeah, that's right. They've been pretty remarkably successful at influencing policy and stalling progress.
It's a sobering reminder of the power that they wield. But it does sound like the public's becoming more aware of these tactics.
Yeah.
Right? That's got to be a positive sign, right?
It is. The reports show that people are increasingly distrustful of the industry and want to see stricter regulations. That shift in public perception is encouraging,
Yeah.
but we can't afford to be complacent.
So what can people do to push back against this influence? I mean, what can one person do against like such a powerful adversary?
Well, every voice matters, right? People can contact their representatives, demand stronger action, support organizations that are fighting for tobacco control, and of course, staying informed about the industry's tactics and, the dangers of their products is key.
So you're saying we can't just like sit back and hope for the best. We have to like actively participate in this fight.
Exactly. It sounds like a classic David and Goliath battle.
Yeah.
But with enough public awareness and pressure, we can start to level the playing field.
All right. Speaking of trying to appear as the good guys, let's talk about the industry's, attempts to rebrand themselves and their image. What are some of the more, I don't know, audacious examples of this PR spin?
Well, they've tried to infiltrate prestigious events like the World Economic Forum,
Mm-hmm.
sponsoring high-profile conferences. They've even funded public health centers and offered to provide cessation services to government employees.
So they're trying to like buy their way into legitimacy
Yeah.
after decades of deceit.
It's a cynical strategy. But thankfully, it hasn't entirely worked. The public is still largely skeptical.
Okay. So despite their best efforts, it seems like the industry is facing an uphill battle here. Public opinion is turning against them, and the end game movement's, gaining momentum.
Exactly. But we can't underestimate their power or their willingness to, fight dirty. This is a battle that will require a sustained effort and vigilance.
Now, before we move on to discussing the specific endgame strategies from these reports, I want to make sure we touch on, one of the most radical proposals, abolishing cigarette sales altogether.
Yeah, right. That's where Robert Proctor's report comes in.
Yeah.
He argues that cigarettes are so inherently dangerous and harmful that they should be treated like other, banned substances.
He compares them to lead paint and asbestos,
Right.
things that we now recognize as far too dangerous to be sold.
Exactly.
And he really highlights the industry's long history of broken promises. I mean, they've repeatedly claimed that they would stop making cigarettes if they were proven harmful,
Yeah,
and yet, they continue to produce and market them aggressively.
right.
It just seems like a blatant disregard for public health, driven purely by profit. Proctor even argues that banning cigarette sales would actually increase freedom rather than restrict it. How is that possible?
He points out that most smokers don't actually enjoy their habit. They're just addicted to it.
Right.
So by removing the source of their addiction, we would be, liberating them from this harmful and often unwanted dependence.
So it's like turning the argument about, individual freedom on its head, but, wouldn't a ban just lead to a black market and, empower criminal organizations?
It's a common concern.
Right.
But, Proctor argues that that's overblown. He points to the fact that, smuggling already exists because of pricing disparities and the industry's own tolerance of contraband.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that the goal is to ban sales, not possession, right?
Right.
People would still be free to, grow their own tobacco if they chose.
That's a really important distinction.
Right. The focus is on stopping the industry from profiting off addiction, not, criminalizing individual smokers.
So this isn't about like punishing people who smoke. This is about like getting at the source of the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a strong case to be made for a ban, but, is it politically feasible? Could this actually happen?
It's a long shot,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
The industry is powerful, and there's a lot of money at stake. But it's not unprecedented, right?
Mm.
Several U.S. states banned cigarette sales in the early 20th century, and Bhutan has had a ban in place since 2004.
Wow. Okay. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And, as the endgame movement gains traction, the idea of a ban, it might become, more mainstream.
That's the hope.
Okay, well, we've explored this concept of endgame.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, the industry's tactics and the argument for abolition. So, I think we've laid a solid foundation for understanding the complexities of this issue.
Yeah, definitely. This is a fight that will require ongoing attention, education, and advocacy. We've got a lot more to unpack, and I'm eager to delve into the specifics of these endgame strategies.
Sounds good to me. Let's pick up this conversation in part 2 of our deep dive, where we take a closer look at those near-term strategies aimed at curbing the industry's influence right now.
Sounds great.
All right.
Welcome back. Let's dive into some of those near-term endgame strategies we touched on earlier.
Okay.
These are the concrete actions that can make a real difference right now in curbing the tobacco industry's influence.
Right, because it's one thing to talk about big radical ideas,
Right.
but it's the day-to-day, on the ground efforts that will ultimately shift the landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most impactful strategies, and perhaps the most hotly debated, is restricting flavors in tobacco products.
Right.
The reports highlight how, these enticing flavors, especially in e-cigarettes, are really a key driver of youth initiation.
Yeah, it's easy to see the appeal, right? I mean, they those candy-like flavors, they mask the harshness of the nicotine, and they make these products seem less intimidating, even fun to young people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just speculation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the evidence is clear. Places that have implemented, comprehensive flavor restrictions, they've seen significant reductions in youth tobacco use.
So banning flavors seems like a logical step.
Yeah.
Protect the kids. But I'm guessing the industry isn't going down without a fight.
Of course not.
What are their arguments against flavor restrictions?
Well, their main argument is that, adults enjoy flavors too.
Right.
And that bans infringe on consumer choice.
Right.
But let's be honest, their primary concern is losing a huge chunk of their market, particularly among young people who are, much more susceptible to the allure of these flavors.
It always circles back to the bottom line.
It does.
Okay. What about restrictions on points of sale? I remember reading about that in one of the reports. What kind of impact can those have?
Well, limiting tobacco sales to adult-only stores, reducing the density of tobacco retailers.
Okay.
I mean, that can make a surprisingly big difference.
Okay.
It makes it harder for young people to, access these products.
Right.
Reduces their exposure to marketing. I mean, think about it. If you don't see cigarettes at the checkout counter every time you go to the grocery store,
Right.
it's less likely to be on your mind.
That makes sense, and it also makes it less convenient for people who are trying to quit. Right. If you have to go out of your way to buy cigarettes, you might think twice before giving in to a craving.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment that supports quitting and discourages initiation. It's not about punishing smokers. It's about making healthy choices the easier choice.
All right. So we've got flavor bans, and we've got limiting ways cigarettes can be sold. What about addressing the nicotine itself? I know the FDA has been discussing reducing nicotine in cigarettes.
Yeah.
Is that a realistic strategy?
It's a fascinating strategy, and it's one that the industry has actually manipulated to their advantage in the past. Remember light cigarettes?
Oh, yeah.
They were marketed as less harmful.
Right.
Even though they were just as addictive.
It was all just clever marketing.
Right. The idea behind this current strategy is different.
Okay.
It's about reducing nicotine in all combustible products.
Yeah. Okay.
To a level that's non-addictive. So it wouldn't eliminate smoking overnight.
Right.
But it would make it much harder for people to become addicted in the first place.
So it's about tackling the root of the problem,
Yeah.
the addictive power of the nicotine.
Exactly.
Okay. What does the research say about reducing nicotine to these non-addictive levels?
Well, the reports cite some really compelling studies.
Okay.
There's a specific threshold of nicotine that triggers the addiction response in the brain, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you can keep nicotine levels below that threshold, you can significantly reduce the risk of addiction.
That's incredible. It sounds almost too simple.
It does.
But I'm sure the industry has some counter-arguments.
They do.
Right.
They'll likely argue that it'll lead to, smokers compensating by just smoking more cigarettes. But the research suggests that that's not likely to happen on a large scale. And even if someone did smoke more, wouldn't it be better for them to be smoking more non-addictive cigarettes and fewer, addictive ones?
That's a good point. You're shifting the risk-benefit equation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about flavors and points of sale and tackling nicotine levels.
Yeah.
What about cessation support?
Yeah.
It seems like, any strategy aimed at At ending tobacco's influence needs to include helping people who already smoke,
Absolutely.
right? To quit.
It's not just about preventing new smokers. It's about supporting those who want to, break free from their addiction.
Right.
We can't just focus on, closing the door.
Right.
We need to, provide an open path out.
And that means, ensuring access to effective cessation programs, right? Making sure that people can, afford the medications, the counseling, things like that they might need.
Yeah. Exactly. Right now, access to cessation services is patchy at best. We need to make sure that everyone who wants to quit has access to the support that they need, regardless of, their income or their background.
And it's not just about providing services.
Right.
It's about changing, the culture around quitting.
Right.
We need to get rid of the stigma associated with addiction.
Yeah.
And create a more supportive environment for people who are trying to quit.
I couldn't agree more.
Mm.
It's about recognizing that addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. It requires compassion, understanding, and support, not judgment.
Okay. These near-term strategies, flavor bans, point-of-sale restrictions, reducing nicotine, improving cessation access, they all seem like solid steps in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the bigger long-term goals, the ones that, might take decades to implement? What does a tobacco-free future actually look like?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. We're talking about bold, visionary policies
Okay.
that could transform the landscape of tobacco use.
Okay.
One idea that's gaining traction is this concept of a tobacco-free generation.
Right. Right. I remember reading about that. That's the idea of gradually raising the minimum legal age for tobacco sales, eventually phasing out sales to entire generations.
Exactly. Imagine a world where no one born after a certain year can legally buy cigarettes.
Wow.
It would be like a slow-motion ban,
Okay.
gradually phasing out tobacco use without creating a sudden shock to the system.
It's like slowly turning off the faucet
Right.
instead of abruptly shutting it off.
Exactly.
Okay, but wouldn't that take decades to fully implement?
It would. But it's a way to, create lasting change.
Right.
A true shift in societal norms around tobacco.
Right.
And it also gives young people more time to grow up without being exposed to, tobacco marketing and the constant temptation to start smoking.
So it's a preventative approach, aiming to break the cycle of addiction before it even starts.
Exactly.
I can already hear the industry, crying foul, screaming about age discrimination.
Oh, they'll definitely fight it. But public health experts argue that it's a justified measure to protect young people from a product that is, inherently harmful and addictive.
I mean, we already have age restrictions on alcohol and other potentially harmful substances.
Right.
So it makes sense to apply that same logic to tobacco,
Right.
Given the overwhelming evidence of its dangers. What other long-term strategies are being discussed?
Well, another intriguing strategy is capping nicotine levels, not just in combustibles,
Okay.
but in all tobacco and nicotine products.
So we're talking e-cigarettes, vapes, all that.
Yeah. The goal would be to reduce nicotine levels across the board to a non-addictive level.
Okay.
It's a much more ambitious goal. But it would address the fact that the industry is constantly evolving, right?
Mhm.
Finding new ways to deliver nicotine to consumers.
It's like a game of whack-a-mole.
It is.
As soon as
Right.
you restrict one product,
Right.
another one pops up.
Exactly.
And a comprehensive nicotine cap, that would address the root of the issue.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be incredibly difficult to enforce?
Well, it would be a challenge, but not impossible.
Okay.
The FDA already has the authority to regulate nicotine levels,
Uh-huh.
and they've been, working on developing the scientific basis for a comprehensive cap.
Okay.
It's a complex undertaking, but it has the potential to fundamentally change the landscape of tobacco use.
If you can effectively remove the addictive element
Right.
from all these products, you're taking away a lot of their power.
Absolutely.
It's a bold vision.
It is.
Yeah.
And it leads us to, I guess, the most radical long-term goal,
Mhm.
restricting or prohibiting the sale of cigarettes and other combustible products altogether.
Yeah, we've touched on this idea before, but it's worth exploring further.
Right.
I mean, is a complete ban even remotely feasible.
Well, it's certainly the most controversial proposal,
Right.
but there are some strong arguments in its favor.
Okay.
You know,
Uh-huh.
as we discussed, cigarettes are the deadliest consumer product in history.
Yeah.
They cause immense suffering,
Right.
drain healthcare resources, contribute to environmental damage.
And the vast majority of smokers, I mean, they wish they could quit.
They do.
Ew. So banning sales would be, a way to help them break free from addiction and protect future generations from ever starting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, as you can imagine, this proposal faces fierce opposition from the industry, who will fight, tooth and nail to maintain their profits.
This is going to be a tough battle.
It is.
Yeah. But it's a battle worth having.
I agree. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Near-term strategies, long-term goals, the industry's pushback. It's clear that ending tobacco's influence is going to require a multifaceted approach.
Yeah.
Combining, immediate action with a long-term vision.
Absolutely. And it's going to require all of us to stay informed, engaged and
Yeah.
willing to challenge the status quo. The industry won't give up easily, so we need to be, persistent in our efforts to create a healthier future.
It's a fight worth fighting.
It is.
And it's encouraging to see that public awareness is growing.
Yeah.
We're not alone in this.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
where we'll explore how to effectively counter the industry's misinformation campaigns,
Right.
I think it's crucial to acknowledge one of the biggest hurdles to implementing any of these strategies:
Great.
the potential for unintended consequences.
Right. Because, no policy exists in a vacuum.
Right.
There's always a risk of, unforeseen ripple effects.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the potential downsides that we need to be mindful of?
Well, one of the concerns that's been raised is that, policies like banning menthol cigarettes, for example,
Mm-hmm.
could inadvertently lead to increased interactions between law enforcement and Black communities.
Right.
These communities have been disproportionately targeted by the industry's menthol marketing.
Right.
And there's a worry that, enforcement of a ban could further exacerbate existing racial disparities in policing.
That's a valid concern.
It is. Any enforcement efforts, need to be equitable and avoid further marginalizing already vulnerable communities. It's not just about banning a product. It's about creating a fairer and
Right.
more just system.
And it highlights the importance of robust community engagement, right?
Absolutely.
Policymakers, they need to listen to the concerns of the people who are most affected by these policies.
Right.
And work collaboratively to find solutions that address those concerns.
Collaboration and dialogue are essential.
Yeah.
It's not just about passing laws. It's about building trust and working together to create a healthier future for everyone.
Okay. Another concern is the potential for black markets,
Yeah.
right, to emerge, especially if a complete ban on cigarette sales were to be implemented.
That's a common argument used by the industry, to try to scare people. They'll
Yeah.
claim that bans will just drive sales underground,
Mm-hmm.
empower criminal organizations, create a dangerous, unregulated market.
But didn't we touch on this earlier?
It did.
I mean, smuggling already exists, right? And
Yeah.
It's often fueled by the industry itself.
Right. And a well-regulated legal market, can actually help to reduce the demand for black market products.
Plus, it's important to remember that most endgame strategies, they focus on restricting sales, not possession.
Right.
The goal is to make it harder for the industry to profit,
Right.
not to criminalize individuals who choose to smoke.
It's about shifting the focus from, punishment to public health.
Okay. Another potential hurdle is funding.
Right.
Right. I mean, all
Yeah.
of these strategies, whether it's, enforcement of bans, supporting cessation programs, conducting public education campaigns, all these things require significant financial investment.
That's true. And unfortunately, tobacco control programs have often been underfunded, especially at the state level.
Yeah.
And the industry, is going to continue to lobby against any efforts to increase funding for these programs. So it's a constant battle for resources.
It seems like a classic case of short-sightedness,
It does.
Investing in prevention and cessation programs now will save money in the long run by, reducing healthcare costs and lost productivity.
Precisely. But convincing lawmakers to prioritize long-term gains over short-term costs, I mean, it can be challenging. And then, of course, there's the industry itself. I mean,
Right.
they have deep pockets, powerful lobbyists, and a long history of fighting dirty.
Yeah, they're gonna use every tactic in their playbook to delay, weaken, or derail any of these strategies.
Hmm.
So we need to be prepared for a long and difficult battle.
It sounds daunting,
It can be.
but I'm also sensing like a growing momentum for change, you know?
Yeah.
More and more people are waking up to the industry's tactics and demanding action.
That's the key. We need to stay informed, engaged,
Right.
and united in our efforts.
Yeah. Well,
The only way to defeat the tobacco industry is to work together across disciplines, across sectors.
right.
Public health experts, policymakers, researchers, advocates, community members, we all have a role to play.
It's about creating a movement,
It is.
a groundswell of support for a healthier future.
And it's about being persistent.
Mm.
The industry is relentless in its lobbying efforts.
Yeah.
So we need to be just as relentless in our advocacy.
We need to hold them accountable for the harm that they've caused
Yeah,
and push for bold solutions that put public health first.
I agree. The fight to end tobacco's influence is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
And we need to be in it for the long haul.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
where we'll explore how to effectively counter the industry's misinformation campaigns.
Mhm.
I think it's crucial to acknowledge one final challenge, and that's the issue of disparities.
Right. You're referring to the fact that certain groups are disproportionately affected by the tobacco industry's tactics.
Exactly.
The reports highlight how the industry has historically targeted specific communities,
Mm-hmm.
often those with, limited resources
Yeah.
or facing systemic inequalities.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
talking about, Black Americans, LGBTQ plus individuals, those with mental illness, low-income communities. They've all been subject to, really aggressive and predatory marketing from the tobacco industry.
And because of those targeted campaigns,
Right.
these communities also tend to experience higher rates of smoking and tobacco-related diseases.
Absolutely.
So it's really crucial that any endgame strategies are designed
Right.
not only to be effective,
Yeah.
but also to be equitable.
Right.
We need to be mindful of how these policies might impact different groups and work to ensure that they don't exacerbate existing disparities.
Yeah, that's right. It's about creating a future where everyone has an equal opportunity to live a healthy life,
Right.
free from the grip of tobacco addiction.
Okay, so we've got flavor bans, point-of-sale restrictions, reducing nicotine, improving cessation access, tackling disparities.
Yep.
Those are all crucial components of a comprehensive endgame strategy.
They are.
But those are all focused on what policymakers and public health organizations can do.
Right.
What about the individual? What can someone like you who's listening to this deep dive, what can they do to contribute to this fight?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the most important things you can do is just stay informed.
Okay.
The more you understand the industry's tactics, the better equipped you'll be to spot their misinformation campaigns
Right.
and make informed choices.
So it's about being a critical consumer of information, not just taking things at face value, especially when it comes to anything related to the tobacco industry.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your voice.
Okay.
You can contact your elected officials
Uh-huh.
and let them know that you support strong tobacco control measures. Advocate for policies that restrict youth access, ban flavored products, increase taxes, limit the industry's influence.
So every voice matters in this fight.
It does. And there's strength in numbers.
Right.
Support organizations that are working to expose the industry's tactics
Right.
and promote evidence-based solutions. You can donate, you can volunteer your time, or just simply spread the word about, their work on social media.
It's about building a movement.
It is.
Right, a collective force for change.
Yeah. And don't forget the power of your personal choices.
Yes.
If you're a smoker, there are resources available to help you quit.
Mm,
And if you're not a smoker, you could be a positive influence on those around you.
right.
Encourage your friends and family to make healthy choices and be supportive of those who are trying to quit.
It's about creating a culture of
Yeah.
health and well-being.
Right.
One conversation, one choice at a time.
Well said.
Okay. I know this has been a lot of information to process. We've covered a lot of ground, from the concept of endgame to, the specific strategies and the potential challenges.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to make sure we take a deeper look at one of the most effective yet often controversial strategies for reducing tobacco use: taxation.
Yeah. Taxation's, that's been a hot topic for a long time. How does it fit into this bigger picture of ending tobacco's influence?
Well, increasing taxes on tobacco products is one of the most proven ways to reduce consumption, especially among young people
Yep.
who are more sensitive to price changes. It's simple economics, right? When the price of a product goes up, demand goes down.
It seems counterintuitive, but the reports actually suggest that higher taxes can be particularly effective in low-income communities.
Oh, okay.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because price increases have a more significant impact on people who are already struggling to make ends meet. So they're more likely to cut back on smoking or quit altogether
Okay.
when faced with a higher price tag.
So a strategy that some might perceive as regressive
Right.
can actually have a positive impact on those who are most vulnerable to the industry's tactics.
That's right. And the revenue generated from, those increased taxes can then be channeled back into public health initiatives, funding smoking cessation programs, educational campaigns, research.
So it's like a win-win situation. Then
Yeah.
you reduce smoking rates,
Right.
and you generate resources to further support public health efforts.
But of course, it's not without its challenges.
Yeah.
The tobacco industry, they're going to fight tooth and nail against any tax increases using, their usual tactics.
Right.
Lobbying, misinformation, fear-mongering.
They'll argue that it's unfair to smokers, that it's regressive, that
Mhm.
it'll lead to black markets. But the evidence really shows that tobacco taxes are a proven and effective tool for reducing tobacco use and saving lives.
It is. It's a strategy that deserves our attention and support.
All right. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the future of tobacco,
Yeah.
let's recap some key takeaways. It's clear that ending tobacco's influence, it's going to require this multi-pronged approach, combining, short-term strategies with a long-term vision. We need to address everything from, restricting flavors to reducing nicotine levels to providing, robust cessation support to tackling disparities.
And we need to be prepared for a long and difficult battle with a powerful and well-funded adversary.
Right.
But we're not alone in this fight.
Right.
Public awareness is growing, and the endgame movement is gaining momentum.
What I find particularly encouraging is that, the reports highlight this growing disconnect between the industry's PR spin
Right.
and the public's perception. People are becoming more savvy to their tactics and demanding stronger action.
That's a positive sign.
Yeah.
But we can't afford to be complacent.
Right.
We need to stay, informed, engaged, actively involved in pushing for change.
So as you continue to explore this issue, we encourage you to, consider the information we've discussed,
Yeah.
weigh the potential benefits and challenges of the various strategies, and most importantly, think about how you can contribute to this fight for a healthier future.
It's a fight worth fighting.
Yeah.
And it's a fight that we can win if we work together.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the future of tobacco and nicotine. We've explored, a range of strategies aimed at ending the industry's influence. But, I feel like we need to circle back to one of the most controversial proposals, right? A complete ban on cigarette sales.
Yeah. It's a bold idea.
It is.
And one that sparks a lot of debate, for sure. Is it feasible? Is it ethical? What can we learn from history? The reports you shared, they offer some interesting perspectives on this.
One of the most compelling arguments, I think, comes from Robert Proctor, who advocates for what he calls abolition.
Right.
He draws this parallel to other, dangerous products that have been banned, like lead paint, asbestos,
Right.
Framing cigarettes as just inherently harmful, even defective by design.
That's a That's a powerful comparison, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, we wouldn't hesitate to ban a product that posed such a clear and present danger to public health today.
Exactly. It makes you think, like, why are cigarettes any different?
Right.
Proctor argues that cigarettes are engineered for addiction, from the nicotine levels to the way tobacco is processed to the design of the cigarette itself.
Yeah. It's fascinating. He's not just arguing for reducing smoking. He's suggesting that we need to fundamentally rethink the product itself.
Yeah.
If we can't eliminate the harm, maybe the solution is eliminating the product.
Hmm. He also he dives into the tobacco industry's history, a long and troubling track record of broken promises.
Mm-hmm.
They've repeatedly pledged to stop, production if cigarettes were proven harmful.
Yeah.
And yet here we are decades later still grappling with the devastating consequences of their products.
Yeah. It makes you question whether the industry is even capable of
What?
genuine change at all.
Okay. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about, the practical side of things.
Right.
Wouldn't a ban just push cigarette sales underground?
Right.
Creating this like massive black market and empowering criminal organizations? I mean, that's a concern I've heard a lot.
It's a valid concern and one that the industry loves to, exploit. But the reports suggest it's not as simple as that. I mean, remember, smuggling already exists, often fueled by price differences and even tacitly supported by the industry itself.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that earlier. It's not like a ban would create a problem that doesn't already exist. Plus, we're talking about a ban on sales,
Right.
not
Yeah.
possession, right?
People could still, theoretically grow their own tobacco if they change.
Exactly. It's about shifting the landscape, disrupting the industry's power and prioritizing public health over profits. The focus is on stopping the industry from profiting off addiction,
Right.
not on criminalizing individual smokers.
That's an important distinction.
And, as you mentioned before, there are historical precedents for this kind of bold action,
Right.
Several U.S. states banned cigarette sales in the early 20th century, and Bhutan has had a complete ban in place since 2004.
Yeah, those examples show that, a ban, while challenging, isn't unprecedented.
Or impossible.
And as the endgame movement gains momentum, as the public becomes more aware of the industry's tactics and as the undeniable harms of tobacco, continue to mount,
Mm-hmm.
the idea of a ban, might gain wider acceptance.
It's a thought-provoking concept for sure,
It is.
and one that definitely merits further exploration.
We've seen how adaptable the industry is.
They
They're
are.
constantly evolving and finding new ways to market their addictive products.
Right.
So maybe a complete ban is what it takes to finally break free from their grip.
It's a bold idea, no doubt. But, as we've seen throughout history, sometimes bold ideas are exactly what we need to solve, deeply entrenched problems.
Okay. So we've discussed the rationale for a ban.
Yeah.
But let's get real for a moment and
Yeah.
talk about the potential challenges.
Even if we, clear the political hurdles and a ban becomes law, I mean, there will be obstacles to overcome.
You're right. One of the most significant challenges will be enforcement.
Right.
Ensuring that retailers comply with the ban, cracking down on illegal sales, preventing smuggling. That's all going to require, significant effort and resources.
It's almost like a game of whack-a-mole, right?
It is.
As soon as you shut down one avenue for illegal sales,
Yeah.
another one might pop up.
Right.
It demands like constant vigilance, adaptability, coordination among different agencies.
Absolutely. It's not just about passing a law. It's about creating a system
Right.
that can effectively implement and enforce it.
Right.
And that requires resources. Funding for enforcement agencies, public education campaigns, community outreach programs.
We also need to think, beyond enforcement
Oh,
and, and address the root causes of tobacco demand.
Yeah.
Things like, poverty, social isolation, mental health issues.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
all these things can contribute to tobacco use.
You've hit on a crucial point.
Yeah.
We can't just focus on restricting supply.
Mm.
We need to address demand as well.
Right.
And that means investing in strategies that empower, individuals and communities to make healthier choices.
Another challenge we'll face is managing public perception.
Oh, for sure.
That the industry won't won't go down quietly.
Right.
They'll likely launch a massive PR campaign,
Yeah.
to demonize the ban, portray smokers as victims, and stoke fear about a rampant black market.
Oh yeah, we need to be prepared for that.
Right.
They'll seize any opportunity to exploit, any unintended consequences, any
Yeah.
hiccups in enforcement, or any anecdotal evidence of illegal sales
Right.
to paint the ban as a failure.
So we need to be proactive, transparent,
Yeah.
consistent in our messaging.
Open and honest communication, backed by evidence,
Mhm.
is going to be key to maintaining public support
Right.
and ensuring the long-term success of the ban.
We also need to be patient.
We do.
It may take time for the full effects of the ban to be realized.
It will.
We can't expect an overnight solution to a problem that's been, deeply entrenched for centuries.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
The key is to stay focused on the long-term goal, a healthier tobacco-free future.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the potential challenges.
We have.
But, let's not lose sight of the potential benefits,
Yeah.
right? If we can make this work,
Yeah.
the rewards, they could be truly transformative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where the leading cause of preventable death is no longer readily available. Think about the dramatic reduction in healthcare costs associated with smoking-related diseases. Picture a generation of children growing up without ever being exposed to, the relentless marketing and temptation of tobacco.
It's a powerful vision and one worth striving for.
It is.
What might seem radical and impossible today could become, common sense tomorrow.
Right. Think about, seatbelts,
Right.
smoking bans in public places, the removal of lead from gasoline.
Right.
All of these measures were once considered, controversial,
Right.
even radical.
But they're now widely accepted as essential public health interventions.
They are.
So a ban on cigarette sales, that might follow a similar trajectory, as the evidence mounts, as public awareness grows, as
Right.
the end game movement gains strength, it could very well become the next frontier in tobacco control.
It's an exciting prospect for sure.
Yeah.
It's a challenging path, but one that has the potential to save millions of lives and create a healthier future for generations to come.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you to reflect on everything we've discussed.
Cool.
Weigh the potential benefits and challenges of a complete ban.
Yeah.
Consider the ethical implications, the historical precedents, and the lessons we've learned from other public health victories.
Right.
And most importantly, ask yourself, what role can I play in creating a future where tobacco is no longer a threat to public health?
That's the question we should all be asking ourselves.
Because this is a fight that requires all of us to be informed, engaged, and committed to creating a healthier world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Oh, my pleasure.